Well, hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Running the Gauntlet. Today, we are continuing our progression through Phase 3 of the gauntlets located within the Curse of the Vampire DLC, and that brings us to the level 85 Revenge of the Black Order Gauntlet. This one is pretty interesting, and it's a lot shorter in terms of the legs of the gauntlets that we have to go through, with there only being 4, where we have seen a tradition of there being 5 or 6 in some of the more recent ones. But don't let that fool you, because there are a couple of very technical things you need to be aware of when taking on this gauntlet. So let's jump right into the thick of it. The first leg of this gauntlet is going to entail a 3-part fight against the mini-bosses that are in the first half of, well, the fights against the Black Order. That means you will sequentially face off against Ebony Maw, Supergiant, and Cull Obsidian. And the fights are pretty standard. The only real adjustments to them is the fact that they do have a couple of additional Curse of the Vampire type nodes added to them. As we see here, Ebony Maw has the electric attribute to him. Additionally, you are only going to deal meaningful or significant damage when you are making use of your extreme abilities, which actually helps out quite a bit with one of the clear conditions, being dealing 7 million or more damage with extreme attacks. This first leg is not going to get you all of that 7 million damage within one run, but it is going to be one of the primary sources of that damage as you're seeking to make it out. Now, in addition to your extreme attacks dealing increased damage, you also have an increased and highly accelerated recharge rate when using standard attacks to build up that extreme meter. Thanos Infinite tends to do quite well with this. As you can see, we just spam his heavy attack over and over again, as it has a lot of hits that chain into one another, and that helps you refresh the attacks very, very quickly. You do have 20 minutes to take on this fight, but honestly, if you're playing your cards right, you can get this defeated in less than 5. As I believe that I got this run done in about 3 minutes or less. So moving right on into the second phase, we have the conquest against Supergiant. Her attribute that you need to be aware of is she has the Ice Curse, meaning that if you stay in that proximity for too long, you will become immobilized and encased in ice, which is not fun for anyone. Another thing that's really nice about having Thanos Infinite as a part of the team is his extreme attack instantly breaks down the stagger bar of mighty enemies, including mini-bosses, so he's quite nice to have on hand and use in a pinch. Beyond that, we just continue layering into Supergiant with our standard attacks in order to beef up our extreme attack gauge. And with the final little bit here, we go ahead and just trigger in all of our extreme attacks to get the remainder of Supergiant's health down, and that takes us into the third and final segment of this fight. Yes, there's the transition phase between now and then, but you really shouldn't have to worry about that too much, because you're going to have plenty of time working through this. Honestly, I think that the 20-minute time constraint was very, very generous. So let's get on this elevator, boost ourselves up to the next section, and then blitz right on to the fight against Cull Obsidian. Now, I know I touched on one of the clear conditions here. It's actually the last one that I ended up getting. I had to run the gauntlet almost 3 times to get it. And of course, that first clear condition you're going to grab is going to be by clearing out the gauntlet once, making sure that you clear out each of the 4 segments in one go, which is pretty straightforward. For all of these clear conditions, you are going to end up claiming a variety of different artifacts. You've got some shield tokens and some other things, but there's another one that we'll touch on a little bit later that I am really particularly happy about in terms of what it has to offer. We've now got Cull Obsidian into the second phase of his fight. He does charge around a little bit, and he's got the electric attribute to him as well, similar to Ebony Maw. So just be wary and cautious of that, but with one final detonation of our extreme attacks, we should be able to take him out no problem. As you can see here, we are able to blitz through this fight in less than 5 minutes of the 20 allotted minutes. It is going to require one final use of an extreme attack, so I'm going to use Wolverine's, mainly because it's proximal and we'll do a little bit better. I especially want to have Thanos' on standby for the next segments of the fight, given that it can fully stagger out our opponents as we are looking to initiate combat with them. So let's move into leg number 2 of this gauntlet. This one is an interesting little mashup where it's the fights against the members of, well, these ones appear to be more of the alpha primitives rather than the aim soldiers, but you do have a couple of aim soldiers coming in here as well. You've got 20 seconds on the clock. You can add more time to that timer by defeating different enemies, but honestly, to get into the fight against Proxima Midnight at the end of this particular gauntlet segment, you do need to get through that previous section and this section as well, which is done by targeting the towers that are powering the containment gates. And I've found it best to just use Thanos to kind of sort of guide his heavy attack as best you can into them, as he can rip through them quite quickly and quite efficiently. You can ignore the turrets in this section, provided that you are aware of where they're targeting to avoid succumbing to their attacks. But as we progress further and further through, we will need to pay more attention to these types of turrets, particularly in this last area, because this is where Proxima Midnight spawns in, and you are needing to take her out in order to finish this segment. But these turrets are not going to be forgiving, so you really need to make sure that you've got them on lockdown and you can take them out, so they're no longer providing to be an interference to you or the other members of your team. Kind of important thing to note here, because this is the final combat section, the area there in the back is blocked off, where it is typically left wide open in a standard run for progress into the second section of this Wakandan jungle. We've just about got this section taken down, and now would be a good time for us to touch on the third clear condition. This is defeating 130 enemies, which you could very easily get to that threshold within this segment, or this segment helps a lot with providing those enemies needed for that. I'm just choosing to blitz through it because it is one that's a little more time sensitive than the other legs of this fight. But if you want to take some time and take out those different enemies that are in the vicinity, you really shouldn't have anything to worry about, because they're pretty standard, and by taking them out, you are increasing the amount of time that you have. Again, time is of the essence for me, so I'm just blitzing through it as quickly as I can. Moving into the third segment, we have a round of combat against Supergiant. This is similar to the fight that we saw in the first leg of this gauntlet, with the differences being you are now dealing standard amounts of damage with all of your attacks. Your HP is slowly dropping as you progress throughout this fight, but you do recover some of that health as you are attacking into your opponents. And finally, Supergiant has the effect that will slow all movement from your team and from allies, which can be a little bit daunting and not forgiving. But as we continue to lay into her with some more of our attacks, we'll be able to burn her down. Honestly, the time that you're allotted for this fight is pretty forgiving as well, as it allots 15 minutes. But you can really get through this very, very quickly if you've got the right team set up. Especially because, well, she kind of telegraphs her movements around more so than she otherwise does with its standard fight that you find her within the confines of the story quest. When she teleports and flickers around, you can't really tell where she's going to be, but with the area of effect from the Curse of the Vampire following even her shadow around when her character is not visible, it allows you to get a read on where she's going to end up, which tends to be a little bit nicer when it comes to actually taking on these combat sections. And with a couple of final abilities here, we do have Supergiant fully finished out. It just takes me a moment to track her down in the midst of all of these Ultron bots that are about to explode on us. But right like this, we've got the final bit of her health taken down with just a couple of extra heavy attacks from Thanos' ultimate. And that brings us to the fourth and final leg of this gauntlet, which is a little bit trying. It's basically the exact same fight that you had against Thanos in the Lambda Rifts, where the different members of the Black Order will spawn in. The difference being, here you get them 2 at a time instead of 3 at a time, which make things a little bit more manageable, especially where you have a team at a higher level and teams that have, well, a large area of effect that with the attacks that they can throw out. While we're finishing through blitzing through the members of this team, it's important to note the 4th and final clear condition, which we have not talked about, which is getting a win streak of 8. That's pretty simple, as long as you get a good understanding as to how to manage these sections of the gauntlet. You just need to make your way through it twice in order to clear that clear condition. Of course, it is always important to note that your first run through a gauntlet, you only get as many runs as are available, and then if you replay the gauntlet, you can then loop it back around in order to meet that clear condition. So you will not be able to get that on your first run, but the subsequent run, it should be a piece of cake. Right here is where the fight is coming towards its end. We just have to take on Proxima Midnight and finish out Thanos as well. Now, these two are definitely the hardest hitting and most annoying components of the Black Order, but again, it is kind of nice that they are only being combative in numbers of 2 at a time instead of 3 at a time that was seen with the Lambda difficulty rift where Thanos himself was unlocked. So we'll continue laying into him with a bunch of different ability and synergy attacks here. We've got Proxima Midnight just about down, and I prematurely detonated Wolverine's extreme attack way too far away from the fight. That's one of the things you do have to be cautious of in really any run that you're going for, whether it be a run of a gauntlet, a run of a rift, or just a standard run through the story quest, is you need to be perceptive of where your teammates are before detonating their extreme abilities, especially if they're highly directional. And we will eventually go through a tier list of those extreme attacks and their usefulness as well. But that is going to do it for the Revenge of the Black Order Gauntlet. I hope that this was helpful and instructional. If it was, feel free to leave a like on that video. And if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe, as that subscription is free and easy, and my commitment is to bring videos to you on a daily basis. So thanks again for watching, and I hope that you have an absolutely fantastic rest of your day.